All right, hi everybody. I'm Steven Reisner from Potent Ponics, and today we're going to run through a bunch of different advancements on aquaponic cannabis. I've been working in the aquaponic cannabis industry on the legal side of things since 2012. I formerly worked for the aquaponic source. We were the first company to really get out ahead of everyone else in the aquaponic cannabis research realm. We also did a bunch of different system testing and things like that. We're going to go over a lot of that type of stuff today in terms of side-by-side comparisons, what work, what doesn't, what is much easier to adapt for commercial markets, as well, to kind of save you a bunch of time and so that you don't, waste a bunch of time and money trying some of the stuff that just doesn't work so well for commercial production. For those of you who don't know who I am, my name is Steven Reisner. I'm the owner and operator of Potent Ponics. I have a consulting company. We help people with designs, SOPs, troubleshooting, problem solving, compliance, auditing, all those different types of things in order to help you manage your system, as well as water testing, remote help with things like pests and other things like that. So we also have a aquaponic cannabis podcast called the Growing with Fishes podcast every Thursday at 7:30 p.m. Pacific. And we're also on all of your favorite podcast apps in audio form as well. And then most of our live shows are on YouTube. So we've worked around the world, Jamaica. I'm currently in Thailand, Canada, South America, Southern Africa, Zimbabwe, South Africa as well. So all over. So we've had quite a few successes and lots of cool stuff to show you guys today. Here's some examples of some fine commercial production, as well as some of the different biodiversity that you see in a healthy living aquaponic system. All right, so what is aquaponics and why do you want to use it for cannabis? So aquaponics is growing fish with plants. I think most of you guys that are on this conference know that already. We do use a small supplementation of fertilizer in order to make sure that we hit our target yields, which is completely fine. You simply cannot run aquaponics without supplementation. Anyone that tells you otherwise simply hasn't been growing long enough. Trust me, we've tried everything. You can absolutely do it through organic supplements, but you're certainly not going to do it without any supplementation. Plants filter the water for the fish. The fish provide the vast majority of the plant nutrients, generally about 80 to 85%, and we have to supplement that small additional proportion. You also have things like iron and manganese that get oxidized over time. Aquaponics also provides a good source of water retention for things like island nations or desert nations or places that don't get a lot of rain. Much faster grow times, double the speed of growth in veg, 7 to 15% faster flowering times, much better terpene and flavonoid levels, as well as cannabinoid levels. We're going to talk about that. Better profits overall year over year, all with a lot less water usage. So here's an example of Vertica Aquaponics, which is a company I work with. They're the current largest aquaponic cannabis operator in all of Oklahoma, one of the largest in the country in the United States. And you can see here they're doing quite well. So what are some common aquaponic nutrient myths? Fish poop has everything plants need. That's just not true. You have to supplement. You don't ever need to add nutrients after a year once the system's running. Again, another myth. Molybdenum gets stripped out, manganese gets oxidized, iron gets oxidized, trace elements get used up, and plants just consume things like potassium, calcium, other things that simply aren't found in high enough levels in the fish food. Add maxi-crop plus iron to fix your deficiencies. No, it's a great way to end up with high heavy metal content. You don't need to monitor nutrients or nutrient tests. You absolutely need to be testing for things like this on a commercial scale every 2 weeks. At a home scale at least once a month, if possible. Adding microbes causes imbalances. It does not, as long as you aren't completely reckless about the way you do it. Over-engineering can fix nutrient problems. It can't. You can try all you want. People have tried everything there is. People have to stop focusing on over-engineering the systems and focus on the biology and rebalancing the populations of the biology in the system, and everything kind of handles itself. You also get better yields, better terpenes, and higher dollar per pound for your cannabis. Rock dust has everything you need for nutrients. Remember, most rock dust products are mining byproducts. High and heavy metals can often cause you to fail for commercial testing. Special fish foods can provide all the plant needs. It's just not true. Even things like some of the more commercially available aquaponic fish feeds are often double the price per pound. of other feeds and end up being, almost twice the price per year compared to, half that price plus maybe an additional 15% in supplements. It just doesn't make sense at a commercial scale to use that. If you want to be home scale, you want to feel good about yourself and do organic things, whatever, that's fine, do that. But it's simply not viable for commercial production. Microbial collapse is a real thing. I heard it from this guy one time. It's complete BS. Ferments will kill your soil and your plants. Again, completely not true. We have people, a gentleman I know in Vietnam running systems completely off of nutrient fermentation for all nutrient supplementation now. They're proving out the model, and then they'll be talking about that more in the future. But there's people that are far more advanced in a lot of the stuff than people think. So I want people to stop thinking about it as hydroponics and aquaculture and start thinking of it as making aquatic soil using fish as a nutrient source. So thinking of it as aquatic soil means you're thinking of it in terms of balanced microbial biology and making sure that you're maintaining all these different species. And when you start thinking about it in that form, you start to have much better results, much fewer pest problems, much fewer instances of root rot, and even can you deal with some pretty nasty things like some viruses and even things like high water temperatures in the summertime without any type of problems because the biology is there to handle that. So it's definitely one thing I want people to stop talking about it as hydroponics plus aquaculture. It's much more like an aquatic soil system that we're maintaining in terms of biology and everything else. Remember, aquaponics on average is 168% more microbial biodiversity than living soil. So, we need to be calling it aquatic soil and not, anything else. Plus, it also really annoys the soil guys, the organic soil guys that try to get us banned every year. That drives them nuts. So for no other reason, do it for that. So huge increase in cannabinoids using dual root zone aquaponics, which we're going to talk about today. Here's a fine picture of the nice trichome density you can get when you do everything right with dual root zone aquaponics. This is often we get 15% increase in THC. We've seen as high as 50% increase in THC in some cultivars. CBD on average, we can get as much as a 30% increase, but it's sometimes often a 100% increase in CBD, with some cultivars being much more receptive to the microbes in aquaponics for whatever reason for CBD production. So if you're homing in on CBD at higher latitudes, certainly something to think about. And then a large increase in minor cannabinoids, things like THCV and CBDV, using certain methods in aquaponics can be very much boosted. CBG is another one that can be very much boosted in aquaponics, as well as things like CBC and CBT, which are minor cannabinoids that have much higher dollar values. Most of those are $75,000 a kilo or more. So very much a market that really can be taken advantage of currently and still has kind of maintained a higher price for quite a while. A big increase in total terpenes, as much as 300% in terms of total terpenes in many cultivars, on average 30 to 75%, but some of them even more than that. Importance of SOPs, you have to have your procedures written out, an instruction manual to keep your employees accountable, as well as making sure they know what they should be doing and the right way to do it. Not having a good set of SOPs and investing in that manual for your facility is one of the biggest things I see people do wrong. And in many markets now is something that is absolutely required even for license applications. So certainly something that you need to take the time, invest in a good set from someone like myself or someone else that you trust that knows what they're doing if you want to be successful. Otherwise, things can go south quickly and you don't have any type of accountability, and then also you don't have a way to defend yourself if you're the law enforcement or the government's accusing you of doing something wrong. You can say, no, we follow the procedures, here's our procedures, this is what we did, we didn't do anything on our end, so whatever happened once it left our hands. So it's just a way of CYA and protecting yourself from legal issues. How can aquaponics help soil operations? So if you're trying to figure out, how can this help me in my soil farm, it can help be used great for nurseries, for cloning, because you can, again, grow plants twice as fast in aquaponics. Can provide a great, running large-scale aquaculture is a great way to provide things like large-scale off-site fertilization for things like nitrogen. We have a lot of facilities now in Oklahoma using aquaculture waste for their systems, which microbiologically are adding quite a bit of nutrients to the system. So you can kind of work that way, especially for larger facilities. That can make a little bit more sense. Aquaponics can provide accelerated breeding. Again, because the plants grow faster, we can get faster turnover times, faster flowering times. We also see an increase in seed production and size of seeds in aquaponics compared to ones in soil. So it's another way you can kind of capitalize on that. We often do mushroom production in CO2 as well for the CO2 as well. So mushroom chambers. You can see here there's a fish tanks below that. There's a sensor at the bottom once the CO2 gets so high. Obviously, normally the doors are shut. But once the CO2 gets so high, it pumps the CO2 to the plants to increase production. And then we also have a way of financially benefiting from that CO2 production as well. And any of the phytals that fall down, the fish eat. So it works out good. So dual root zone aquaponics is the key to really main scale production and commercial production of all aquaponic cannabis. Dual root zone production allows you to adapt any cultivar that you want to, whatever the flavor of the week is that's popular right now, immediately throw it in there, adjust the soil mix to be what it wants to be, and then maintain the same soil nutrient levels in the aquaponic system for your whole facility. This way you don't have to micromanage everything so much. You can micromanage just on a per cultivar basis and not have to adjust the full nutrient base. 90% of it's going to come from the same thing. You're just making those minor adjustments for your heavier feeding cultivars via the top of the soil system, either automated with things like blue mats, which work really well with this type of system, or with hand watering or other manifold systems. So definitely something to think about. So this allows control for possible supplementing of plants in a full recirculating system. Also allows for both terrestrial and aquatic and microbial layers. So you have terrestrial soil microbes in the upper portion and aquatic microbes in the bottom half in the flood and drain. And then this eliminates the need for expensive decoupled systems that simply are much more difficult to maintain. They use a lot more water, and then you have to dump the nutrients that are in it. So now you've wasted all that money. They're just significantly more expensive to operate per year. They don't have any commercial production benefits to them, and really just is kind of a dinosaur of the past at this point. Outside of a few, maybe cold water production for cold water fish, it doesn't make any sense anymore. We've figured out the science, we've figured out the chemistry on this much more than I think people realize, and we really are past the point of having needed to decoupled and wasting all that money in water and nutrients anymore. So here's exactly how the dual root zone works. You have pots, you have a media in the bottom, usually lava rock or hydrogen. This is the flood and drain layer. You don't want it to touch the soil. You want there to be an air gap. And then you have the soil above. This allows you to make good living soil up here. You can even use cover crops on top of that if you want to. And then have the flood and drain action here. And what that does is create a diaphragm action, which pulls the air down from the top and allows you to get really good gas exchange, accelerating plant growth rates. Here's some examples of some commercial production of aquaponic cannabis. You can see here, wonderful plants on the right here at my co-host from the podcast, Marty's home facility. And then the one on the left here is ZBD Hemp in Colorado, their CBD facility. On the right here is a facility that we used to work with here in Oklahoma. That's Bain. He currently is the head manager over at Vertica Aquaponics. He's a great guy. In Oklahoma is the head honcho over there at their grows. So definitely look him up. We have some great videos with him on my YouTube channel. The best setup for aquaponic cannabis cultivation is dual root zone media-based flood and drain. It really gives you the best mineralization, the best growth rates, and about 15% more than DWC production, 10 to 15%, but on average about 15%, 12 to 15%. So definitely check that out if you're thinking about it. It really is the best way to go about it if you're doing new construction. If you have to adapt, you already have lettuce facilities, that's no problem. Don't sweat it. But if you're doing new construction, it really is the way that you want to go. And you can see here, this plant here is only 2 months old, and it's already 4 feet tall and 4 feet wide, and just monstrous already. So the plants really grow absolutely nuts in the system. It's also good anchor weight if you're in outdoor systems to keep them from blowing over, which can be a big problem with larger plants. Also, allows you to adjust growth rates and then move the plants around too. If I need to move a plant from room to room or whatever else, it's not a big deal. And then the most common method used in commercial operations, you can move them from your bedroom, flower room, mom room, whatever, and it makes it easy to control. Here's an example of Vertica's operations, they use roller tables that are flood and drain, and then have sit the pots in there, and it works extremely well for getting the most production of your system. And then you can see here another picture there from Marty. Here's an example of a facility I was managing in Oklahoma. You can see here looks like a field of Christmas trees in northern Russia or Alaska or Canada or something. Just stacks on stacks on stacks of buds. And this is what your rooms should look like. If your rooms don't look like this, you're either growing the wrong cultivars or you're not growing right or something. And on the right here is another wonderful picture from Marty. The dual root zone aquaponics with DWC. You can see here where we cut out the bottom of the plants. We put the burlap on there and then sit the plants on there like that. And then here's an example of some larger ones. This is a converted lettuce facility that we fixed up to fully maximize their production. And these are some older moms that were getting, not too long for this world to get restarted. Here's another example of some more DWC dual root zone aquaponics. You see the roots getting massive, and so do the colas. These are some wonderful autos over at Vertica as well. Those are all about the size of 2-liter bottles. They're huge. Here's an example of organic innovations in Oklahoma. Lots and lots of great production going on there. So with dual root zone versus non-dual root zone, you can see here on the right, media bed only, and then on the left here, the dual root zone plant. This plant had 44% more flower sites. This is a tomato. This is the first trial that we did with dual root zone anything back when I worked at TAPS. It had 38% more tomatoes and 44% more fruit and significantly increased yields and overall plant vigor. It wasn't even close. Also increases powdery mildew resistance. As well as improved flavor and flavonoid production, faster growth rates, just all around increased plant health. And the results speak for themselves. I mean, it's almost comical difference in root size. Here's another example of those same roots where we washed them off a little bit to give a better example of the photos. And just root structure as well, much more fine roots than even in the ones that were in the water were much more fine than the ones that weren't. So again, here's another example of a different farm that was doing extremely well. And then I left and moved on to another farm. They ran into some problems. I was out of country. They weren't able to reach me. So they ran into another consultant that gave them some horrible advice and told them to stop supplementing and monitoring the water and just to use a fancy fish food. As you can see, the results on the right were not so great. They ended up killing most of the fish in the system when the plants died, and it was quite the disaster. So then I had to come back in and clean it up and get them back on track again. So again, this is the type of problems that you can be easily avoided by just not listening to the wrong people. If people don't have a large amount of experience doing this and don't have a lot of good bud photos, haven't been around for a long time, don't have a long track record, don't trust them. Lettuce growers have a lot to learn when it comes to cannabis. Don't hire one for a consultant. Here's another example. The plants in the back here were supplemented with a small amount of potassium and phosphorus in dual root zones. The ones in the next row were supplemented with a little bit of worm castings. And then the ones in the front here had no supplementation. You can see here, I think anybody, even a blind person, can figure out which table they would want worth a bud. There's almost a 3 times increase in yield from just a small amount of supplementation. And again, photos speak for themselves. What works and what doesn't. Again, here's a close-up of those same buds, just so that you can get a better idea of what that looks like. These are unsupplemented, and these are supplemented. You can see much thicker buds, all the way down, chunkier buds versus scragglier buds. Much earlier finishing times as well in the trichomes, which is or the pestils, which is really interesting as well, given these are taken on the same day. The plants are the same age. So dual root zone versus DWC versus media bed. So DWC, again, easier to adapt to lettuce facilities, cheaper, easier to climate control in colder climates because that water acts as a thermal battery, so that can be really useful in higher and lower, very high and very low latitudes. Or very high altitudes. Another point there where, hey, using that thermal storage and that water can benefit you in those types of situations. Cheaper initial cost to set up as well, less beds, structure, and all the rest. And then much more commonly available for purchase in terms of facilities that you can snap up. There's a lot of defunct lettuce facilities out there from people that were misled by other people that, anyways, didn't work out. Media beds and flood and drain tables are much, much better. You get better gas exchange, faster growth rates. They use less water. They have cheaper running costs because your supplementation costs are cheaper because the water volume is less. So your running costs are less with them. And then better mineralization overall, again, because you have the higher surface area. Media beds versus wicking beds versus DWC versus dual root zones. So media beds lack additional nutrient inputs. Deep water culture lacks additional nutrient inputs. And many strains hate DWC for whatever reason, it seems like. Although the DWC raft beds seem to work pretty fine, pretty well for most of those cultivars. Wicking beds work really well, but we've had a lot of problems with them the last couple weeks, the last 2 to 4 weeks, when the plants are starting to die back. We've had some issues, so we've kind of drifted away from wicking beds. But there's a lot of my friends that do SIPs, so just because I'm not a fan of it doesn't mean it couldn't work. And I think if I had the knowledge I have now with KNF inputs, I could probably make it work without a problem. Dual root zone flood and drain allows for the most nutrient and microbial control. Again, you can adjust the soil, you can adjust the water, you can, foliar spray, you can do whatever. Avoid decoupled, too much money, too problematic to balance pH and nutrient levels, and cause overall too much headache. Just not worth it. Also, much more expensive per year to run. Indexing valve-based systems, again, another one where if that fails, and this happened to us at one farm in Jamaica, you lose a whole row of plants or multiple rows of plants. You can't have that. You can't. So, avoiding things like that outside of extreme water retention needs, you're just adding complexity to the system and failure points. Stick to bell siphons and loop siphons. They don't fail. And then vertical methods, again, lots of problems with the grow stuff. So definitely avoid those. Bell siphons versus timer versus indexing valves. So bell siphons, most reliable. Loop siphons, you can lump in with bell siphons as well. Can be a little bit tricky to balance, but not too bad. As long as you have flow control of your inputs, and you didn't oversize the output, it's not too bad. Timer-based systems, again, you're doubling the number of failure points at that point. And then indexing valves, again, same thing. You're adding unnecessary failure points. And it's a mechanical thing with moving parts, so it's going to fail within a year or two. So they just aren't good, and they're also extremely expensive. Again, unless you have an extreme need for water conservation, they're really, like maybe Barbados or some other extreme environment like that, they just do not make sense financially. In terms of liability and risk. Not to mention, some of the systems I've seen out there with indexing valves are just absolutely like asinine price, ludicrously, ridiculously overpriced. Like the cost of some small greenhouse entire setups for a 4x4 or 8x8, which, again, there's people ripping off, schools and other things. So circulating systems versus decoupled systems. Fully recirculating systems are really great. Much easier to manage, cheaper to run, less chance of things going wrong, cheaper to set up, much more stable. Decoupled systems, much more upfront cost, harder to balance, which we've talked about over and over. Double the number of failure points because you have pumps back and forth. You have to balance things. Things can go wrong in either half, and you have problems. It's a headache. And then much more water and cost per year. So your 5 controls of a dual root zone, you can add things to the water, you can add things to the soil, you can have a custom soil mix for time release. You can foliar spray if you want to, although we kind of avoid all foliar spraying at this point because it causes way too many compliance problems, and also just it tastes horrible if you're doing any of that in flour, which I've seen people do, which is ridiculous. And then you can also change up the fish food or change up the fish species. With larger systems, we're doing some tanks with herbivores, some tanks with carnivores or omnivores, and then adjusting which tanks are on the system, each greenhouse bay, depending on what system. So it's kind of almost like a hybrid of decoupled and coupled, except it's always coupled, right? So it's never not decoupled. It's never decoupled fully, but we do have, maybe 3 fish tanks down to 1 fish tank in flower. So 3 fish tanks in veg, 2 fish tanks for early part of flower, 1 fish tank in the latter part of flower, to kind of slowly drift that nitrogen down without affecting the main nutrient base of the system. So it can be a great way to kind of handle that problem in a way that doesn't require much labor or moving plants or anything else. So how do you increase terpenes and flavonoids versus other methods? So dual root zones allow for, again, all the terrestrial microbiome. So what triggers terpenes and flavonoids? Reasons why the plant needs to defend itself. So if it thinks that there's fungi or bacteria or viruses or other things in the soil or in the root system, it's going to make defense mechanisms for it. And if they're non-pathogenic, which would be things like the ones that we add to the system or in good living soil, that triggers that same gene expression for those terpenes while allowing for them to not be infected by anything. So you have the soil and the aquatic microbiomes both triggering those immune system responses in the plant's root zones in completely different ways and triggering completely different genomes in the plant's root system, which is super cool. And a way to kind of maximize that, right? The best way to increase flavonoids and terpenes and cannabinoids is by stimulating the plant's root system in as many ways as possible with as many microbial populations as possible. So how do we do that? Add a terrestrial and an aquatic layer, and you have much more control of it, especially when you have to quickly adapt to new current strains. This is the easiest way to quickly adapt to any cultivar on the market within a run or two and immediately start blowing out production so that you can, make the money you need to make to keep the lights on. Because at the end of the day, I think a lot of the people focusing on some of these wacky designs are not focused on that type of stuff yet. So basic aquatic soil chemistry overall, your proper pH should be between 6.4 and 6.8. It's critical for nutrient availability. pH up, we really like calcium carbonate plus potassium silicate with the occasional addition of potassium bicarbonate in order to balance the pH and alkalinity. That combination works much better for plant growth. You'll get better up to a week better shelf life with your lettuce. You'll get much better trichome production out of your cannabis, much denser trichome production out of your cannabis. And overall, it's just a much better method of production. So iron is usually the first nutrient that's depleted in an aquaponic system. We almost exclusively use TPA iron. Sometimes we'll use iron humate or iron citrate if it's an organic certified facility, but in general, you can't legally get it in the United States yet outside of a few state certifications. So it's definitely something that's, just not really worth trying to get right now. And it increases your costs exponentially. And right now, if you're in the cannabis industry, you can't afford to do that. So molybdenum and manganese are often deficient almost always whenever I test people's systems. People do not focus on trace minerals enough, and it's a huge problem. And often the reason why their purples aren't purple, their reds aren't red, their blues aren't blue, whatever's wrong with the color of your plant oftentimes is anthocyanin connected. And then if your manganese is too low, often will, again, lower your THC potential of your cannabis, making your cannabis not as strong as it could potentially be. Because of the primary sources of nitrogen is nitrate in the plants, they tend to uptake molybdenum at a higher rate to convert that nitrate back to ammonia. This allows for a much higher molybdenum uptake, and the plants strip it out at a higher rate. So it's something that you really have to be careful of. Manganese is another one, again, will hamstring your THC potential. Avoid yucca and saponins outside of aloe. That's the only one you should use in aquaponics. Everything else can be harmful to fish. Testing nutrients in-house, Aquarium Pharmaceuticals has good tests for base stuff. Hanna and Lamotte are the other two companies I really like. Hanna's great if you're colorblind or have colorblindness issues or just want digital numbers. Lamotte as well is very good, but it's more color-based. So if you do have color blindness, you do have to invest in either the more expensive Lamotte tests or just go ahead and buy some of the Hanna ones. I have a full list, which we'll get to in a minute, for all this stuff as well. There's Seachem and Salifert and Milwaukee is great, and Blue Labs. If you want a great master list, go to aptestkit.com. We do have a free list of all the different nutrient test kits that you can want out there. Their price per box, everything again on there for free for access to everybody. Manufacturer links, retail links, you name it. It's a great resource if you're trying to test your water at home. We have over 300 different test kits on there, so you can test for pretty much anything. Arsenic and copper and you name it, it's on there. So we have seen some heavy metal problems. So we have seen some aquaponic practitioners pushing mainly the kelp plus iron, or hey, kelp fixes everything, or hey, let's unlimited, the plant's having problems in flower, throw more rock dust in it, throw more rock dust. No, all that stuff's bad. So we've actually seen 4 times the legal limit for arsenic, and people almost breaking levels for cadmium and lead, because they're overusing kelp, rock phosphate, and rock dust. Now you can absolutely use and should be using kelp to some degree in your aquaponic system, but you cannot use kelp plus iron as your iron source. Yeah, it's organic, but you're going to spike your boron and your arsenic, and then you're going to fail your state testing. And then you're going to be like, oh, I can't sell my weed now, and it's got arsenic in it, so I can't smoke it either. So, yeah. So don't do that. Here's an example of a test that I got from a client in Oklahoma who was hired someone else before me, and they screwed their grow up, and then they hired me to fix it. But this is the test that they sent me when we started, which is 4 times the legal limit for arsenic, which is crazy. Again, this is why it's important to get your nutrient information and your aquaponic cannabis information, especially nutrient information from people that have been in the industry for many years and worked in multiple states and multiple markets, rather than just, hey, this guy decided to do cannabis this week. That's cool. I'm glad more people are in the industry, but a lot of people are causing this type of dangerous situation, where you could potentially be harming patients that are sick with cancer or something else, and I'm not okay with that. So that's why we have posts like this to try and inform people you can screw up and actually be a threat to society if you aren't paying attention, and just not, yeah, you think you're being organic, but you can end up harming somebody in an irreparable way. So please be careful if you're getting into some of the more organic stuff, especially the more fancy stuff, because you should be testing this stuff. If you're not testing for mineral content, you're doing it wrong. Seaweed blends. Great if you use them responsibly. MaxiCrop, Cytoplus. Cytoplus in particular is a really good one. I don't really like MaxiCrop. I think it has some heavy metal issues personally if you overuse it. We've seen that. But can be put directly into tanks or sumps. Great to add to ferments. You can see here when we do lactobacillus ferments, it makes a brilliant blue, isolates the phycocyanin, accelerates plant growth rates. But if you overuse it, again, too much boron will cause calcium uptake issues. Again, we talked about heavy metals. Yeah. So pH up, again, we like potassium silicate, calcium carbonate, potassium bicarbonate. We don't like hydroxides, potassium carbonate. There's just hydroxides are pointless in aquaponics because you're only adding one useful nutrient, not two. So they're just, I don't understand why anyone's using them anymore. So fish food and the role of nutrients. So carnivores put out much higher nitrogen levels, higher protein, higher nitrates, and then herbivores and omnivores put out higher phosphorus and a little bit more potassium as their output. So those should be more for your flowering side, and then the carnivores more for your veg side if you're totally min-maxing on larger facilities. Increased profits. So you have additional revenue streams from selling your fish waste, mineralized brews, your microbial inputs, as well as can be a great way to reach out to your community. I know we've worked with a couple of different food banks with different churches, with some of the cannabis farms in Oklahoma donating the fish on a regular basis to their local food pantry. And that can be, again, a great way to make inroads. Or if you're in a cutthroat market where you have a lot of people applying for a small number of licenses and you're the guy that wants to come in and feed the local community and grow cannabis, you're going to get licensed over everyone else 100% of the time. And it can be a great way to kind of get ahead of the list and be more assertive in your license application than you could otherwise be. So definitely something to think about because it's part of your normal production plan. Higher terpenes in aquaponics versus soil mean better price per pound. And then just much more sustainable production. It gives you really good branding, good PR, and everything else, as well as faster flowering time. So you really can't beat that. And nothing compares to the nursery production of an aquaponics facility. So again, overall, just much more profitable. And there's plenty of products now. Fish shit. There's Fishnor. There's plenty of other ones out there that are similar type products that are becoming extremely popular, and you can absolutely capitalize on that market. So mineralization is something I also see often commonly mistaught, and something that I wanted to address. You can see here, these are large 1,200 gallon or 1,400 gallon, I forget how big I think they're 1,200 gallon, if memory serves me right, down there at Vertica. And you can see here the fish waste with the water separated, the mineral, the heavies settled down, and then they'll drain this off the back down into the manifold there. So this is a great way to unlock up to 80% more minerals from your fish waste. Pumping your fish waste into a separate brew tank, brewing it with lots of air stones and aeration, and then adding things like Mammoth P for phosphorus, or Korean natural farming inputs, IMO, or lactobacillus. Or if you're in a Jadam, you can try that stuff. I can't speak for the Jadam stuff myself other than the pest control, but hey, if that's your jam, go ahead and try it. I'd definitely stay away from the sulfur and the wetting agent, but the rest of them should probably be okay. Again, if you have a question and you hit me up on a case-by-case basis, but all the KNF inputs, for the most part, are pretty safe for aquaponics. So definitely check that out, and can unlock even more nutrients, especially IMOs, which we're going to talk about in a minute, from your fish waste. Mineralizing microbes, again, adding additional microbes can increase mineralization by 75 to 80%. Can be a great way to prevent food safety as well. Lactobacillus loves to eat E. coli, Salmonella, and other human pathogens. So a great way to maintain system biosecurity and food safety in your system without bringing it offline. In fact, we've treated 3 commercial facilities now for E. coli that had tested hot for non-human pathogenic E. coli, but was getting false positives in their water tests. Once we treated with lactobacillus, within 30 days, we were able to get completely negative tests across the board for lactobacillus without bringing the system offline, without bringing the system uncycled, and without having to basically deep clean the entire system. We could leave the system online, clean everything, wait for the testing to clear, and then continue to sell product without any type of issues. So it works out extremely well, be it lettuce or cannabis or anything else. So I want people to think about microbes the same way they think about nutrients on Mulder's chart, right? You need to have a balance of your bacteria, lactobacillus, nematodes, archaea, actinomyces, algae, rotifers, protists, mycorrhiza, trichoderma, all the different things that are in the soil need to stay in balance the same way that your nutrients need to stay in balance. If you start thinking about things in this way, you start to have much fewer issues in your aquaponic system because you'll be focused on maintaining the balance of these, and everything else will kind of start solving itself, especially on the disease side. Korean natural farming was first invented out in Japan. Then it was brought to Korea by Master Cho. From Master Cho, he learned and then taught a whole bunch of people who then taught a gentleman named Chris Trump, who taught me. So it's quite a long storied history, and you can check it out. Some quick links to that. I won't go ahead and read all that, but if you're interested in the history, it gives you some stuff to research. So Korean natural farming is first started by Master Cho, or at least publicized in English and by Master Cho. Many methods of plant fermentation and mineralization, as well as microbial propagation. So IMO, indigenous microorganisms, collecting organisms from the forest or healthy root systems, and then adding them back to your system to increase mineralization and fix those gaps in your soil populations that you're missing. This is a great way, especially in aquaponic systems, to rapidly cycle systems in 30 days or less to complete cycling. So no more of this wait 6 months to a year crap for getting full potassium and other things breaking down. You can hit the ground running within 30 to 45 days, and there's no reason why you shouldn't be. I think people really have been misled on that and really need to think about, again, it's like inoculating soil, right? If you do it right and make a compost, and it's the same thing. So you start thinking that way. Liquid indigenous microorganisms is the liquid version of that for application. IPMO, which is a methodology that Chris Trump came up with, which I've been working with quite a bit, which we're going to touch on as well, is collecting local predatory microbes that can attack insects in your local area. Lactobacillus bacteria is commonly found in milk and other things. Definitely a great, one of our best microbial allies in aquaponics. Again, I think in 5 to 10 years, you're going to see lactobacillus dosing required for food safety. It's really that important. WCA, water soluble calcium, great way if you want to produce your own calcium extracts. WCAP, which is great for calcium phosphate if you need phosphorus extraction for your system in an organic way. Water soluble potassium, again, same thing, another great way to add potassium to your system organically. And then PSB, phosphorus solubilizing bacteria, Again, another one that you can get. And then Jadam, which is the grandson of Master Cho, different type of method, but similar kind of mindset. You can check those out yourself. I'm not as familiar with these. I don't work with these particularly, but I have other friends that do successfully. These are very good reference points, especially if you're a vegetable producer. This book here on the right is great for identifying a wide range of common insects in your garden, and definitely something that you want to check out if you're wanting to have a good reference guide for, hey, I need to know what to use for this bug or this bug. Great to keep on the shelf as a panic button in case you don't know what something is. So can't recommend it enough. But these also have lots of herbal solutions that have been proven and worked, and people have tested. So great resources as well. So why use natural farming in your facility? Well, it lowers costs of your nutrient solutions because you're getting a lot more microbes from your fish, or a lot more parts, bioavailable parts per million from your fish waste compared to not using it. You can treat fungal issues really easily with plants with using lactobacillus and liquid IMO combination. Lactobacillus first, then IMO after. Works incredibly well for septoria, botrytis, fusarium, root rot, a whole wide range of different things. So it's really, really good. Um, uh, Downy mildew works really good for that as well. Increased mineralization in aquaponics and soil alike. Again, we've talked about that plenty. Increases flavor compound production. We've talked about that. Offers a great way to supplement nutrients in a way that's fully organic and comparable to mineral salts, which we'll talk about a little bit later on, and how to go about creating your own. And then also increases plants' base resistance to many different microbial pathogens, and then adds mineralizing microbes that might be missing from your aquaponic system. So here's a healthy IMO collection. You can see is a white fungus glowing. This probably could use one more day to finish colonizing, but we had to harvest because there's heavy rains coming. But you can see here that it's kind of just a collection of the various forest fungi, bacteria, archaea in a balanced form. If you're getting all green or all yellow or all red, throw it away. But you should get it mostly white, and we'll show you in the next slide. But this can dramatically increase disease resistance, especially against more extreme and humid climates. And then also dramatically increase mineralization. Again, 80% plus more additional bioavailable ppms when added to mineralization tanks to fit from fish waste. Improve flavor, heat and cold resistance, reduces plant stress and many other beneficial effects. Easy to long-term store, which we'll talk about in a minute. And then again, here's an example of some more healthy collections. So native fungi, bacteria, archaea, and other beneficials. You're going to cook rice about 80% of the way. Throw the rice in a box with a bunch of holes drilled in the bottom, put a screen on top to keep the rats out, and then sit it in a nice fungally dominant leaf litter area. Put a couple of pieces of leaves that have white mycelium fungus on top of the rice when you place the box, and you'll end up with these wonderful collections that you see here. So, and you can check this out. Chris Trump has a wonderful course on this, on all about KNF. I also have some videos on my YouTube channel as well on potent ponics. Or Chris Trump's YouTube channel is also a really wonderful resource for KNF if you want to learn more. So once we have our collection after 5 days, if it's a little bit cooler or your microbes a little bit different, it can take 7 to 10 days if it's a little bit cooler. So now we have our fully fungal dominated rice blocks here. We need to weigh out how many grams. So this is 500 grams. We're going to weigh out 500 grams of sugar, and then we're going to mix it together. And then it's going to blend together, and it's going to look like this when it's done. And then we can take this whenever we need to and use this to create more. And this is shelf stable for up to 3 years. So this locks out the oxygen and basically turns all those microbes into seeds that we can now sprout whenever we need to. So we take a tablespoon of that, plop it in a couple gallons of water, a couple liters of water, turn an air stone on for 24 hours, and away we go. So it really is a wonderful way to really fully maximize the ability to harvest these microbes all year round in different times of year when it matters, and then use them kind of as needed against different things, and to increase bioavailability and mineralization in the system kind of at will. It fixes all of those missing food web problems that we have in aquaponics occasionally, especially I think a lot of people on larger scale or non-lettuce production have run into this issue. So then we brew that up like we are talking about into liquid IMO. and apply it. You can see here this plant's only been on there for 9 hours, and it's already grown roots that are, almost 6 inches long out the bottom of the pot after it got transplanted, which is crazy. And then you can see here later on the plant just was exploding with root growth. Um, it's made from liquid IMO2, or the IMO2, humic acid, a little sugar. You can add a little labs if you have a lot of fungal issues, but normally we kind of drifted away from the labs. I do need to fix that in the slide. Again, best way to add microbial biodiversity. If you already have MBBRs or other, moving media bed reactor systems, add it directly to them to, inoculate them as well. And you'll see an immediate difference in the mineralization and bioavailable ppms of your system. Also has unparalleled plant health and increased flavor. You'll notice within a couple weeks a very big difference in the flavor production of your plants, as well as the overall disease resistance. So what is indigenous predatory microorganisms? This is taking that same concept that we just talked about with collecting the forest microbes to make the plant's roots grow well. We're going to add insect frass or target insects. I'm in Thailand, so we just go to the market and buy a bunch of bags of crickets and then throw them in with the rice. So we're going to cook them with the rice till it's about 80% done, and then we're going to put those boxes out the same way for collection. And then we're going to turn that into IPMO2 the same way that we created IMO2. What it does is it allows you to create your own bio pesticide without having to worry about injuring any of the local wildlife or anything like that. So it's definitely an interesting way, especially if you're in more remote places. I at first had to resort to this when I was in Zimbabwe after COVID hit. We couldn't import or export anything, so we had to rely on creating our own pesticides in order to have any type of success against anything, mainly crickets and grasshoppers in Zimbabwe. It works extremely well against wasps and bees. Be careful if you're using it on things that are being heavily bee pollinated, you will infect them, which you're going to see here in a minute. So scale on aphids, as well as leafhoppers, grasshoppers, beetles, and weevils, it all works extremely well against. We've tested against blister beetles, Japanese beetles, weevils, a whole bunch of things, leafhoppers that are traditionally resistant to things like Bavaria bassiana, Asteria fumiceraceae, or Metarhizium. Stuff that's normally pretty hard to kill seems to respond pretty well to this because, again, you're just collecting the local equivalent to those fungals that I just mentioned, whatever random species it is, and we don't know, but that's not important. The important part is being able to collect it and weaponize that local fungi that's already in tune with your local environment, not a foreign microbe that's going to cause a horrible imbalance, and then wipe out the stuff that's causing you problems without damaging, the local ecology. You can drink IPMO, so it's, you can't drink anything else that kills that many microbes. I wouldn't recommend it. It might get a stomach ache, but I've drank in a shot glass of it and it didn't hurt me none. So again, target an insect frass is going to equivalent to 30% of your weight. So if you're doing a kilo of rice, instead you're going to do 700 grams of rice to 300 grams of insect frass and or your target insect corpses. And then you're going to put that box out for collection, just like we talked about, 5 to 7 days. You're going to come back, collect it, mix it 50% with sugar, equal parts with sugar like we talked about. Now you can use a tablespoon of that in order to create it. And you can see here, this is another example. It's a caterpillar, and he got completely annihilated. And can be a great way to make an extremely cheap pesticide. So here's an example. If anyone wants to screenshot this and use it, I'm not going to read through this. It's going to take too long. We're running out of time for the presentation, but I did want to give people the ability to screenshot this and use it for themselves, modify it, but get this information out there. Post your own YouTube video. I want this to be out there in the world. I want people to learn how to make their own pesticides in a way that's safe, right? This is safe, sustainable, and cheap, anywhere in the world. So, definitely a great way for people to have a new weapon in their toolbox against bugs, especially six-legged insects. Here's an example of how it can go wrong. This is bees that got onto a spray application of IPMO, and they ended up dead. So be careful. Use it with caution if you're using something, a crop that's heavily pollinated by your local bees. You don't want to accidentally wipe out your hive. So here's a liquid IPMO recipe again. Go ahead and copy it. I'm not going to read through it, but I'll allow you guys to use it. So Again, please tell your friends, convert it to whatever language that you speak. We want this information to be out there. That's why it's in this presentation. Lactobacillic acid serum is another good one. Again, made from milk and basically the whey. When you have curds and whey, the whey, which has been broken down by the lactic acid bacteria, is what we use to control molds, powdery mildew, downy mildew, septoria, a whole wide range of different things, as well as E. coli, salmonella, and other more foodborne pathogens. It can dramatically increase microbial growth as well in the system, and tends to play much better than trichoderma. When you have a root issue or root fungal issue, it tends to wipe that out and then achieve a balance again with the soil microbes, whereas trichoderma tends to just obliterate everything and then kind of want to over dominate. So that's why we've kind of moved away from trichoderma and more towards lactobacillic acid serums. And you can see here some examples of probiotics at your local pharmacy, EM1 or Kefir are all great sources. You can also look up Korean Natural Farming Lactobacillus labs, and you can do rice water collection with cheesecloth. There's a couple different ways you can collect lactobacillus, but it works great for, again, Botrytis, Fusarium, Pythium, Septoria, powdery mildew. And it's the cost of milk. It's one of the cheapest pesticides you can make, and you can drink it. It's good for you to drink. It's also high in vitamin B. So it's a plant growth accelerator as well. So it's a great way to increase growth rates of your plants in an organic way. Labs recipe that we like to use. Again, I'm not going to read through it. We simply don't have time. But you guys can screenshot that and use it for yourself so that you have it. Use this time now to screenshot that. Thank you. So we also do plant labs. So we'll take plants, chop them up, and ferment them into lactobacillus. Horsetail is a great way to add silica. Purslane is a great way to add trace minerals. Stinging nettle, another great way to add things like manganese, molybdenum, boron, copper, other micronutrients. Radishes, beets, turnips, another great one for fermenting. Cannabis fan leaves, another great one for doing plant lactobacillus fermentation or liquid IMO fermentation, or comfrey is another one. Here's the Plant Labs recipe that we like to use. Feel free to screenshot this and use this for yourself in your garden. We do have a lot of advanced stuff on all of these types of recipes on my aquaponic cannabis course at apmjclass.com. We also have a lot of pesticide stuff in this realm at my class, thepestclass.com. So be sure to check those out if you want it really in depth on it. We do have over 7 days of content on the cannabis class and counting. We do constantly add new content to the course every 3 to 6 months. And it's a one-time purchase, and you continue to get that ever-growing library of information. Definitely check that out. If you're wanting to learn more about the Korean natural farming stuff or the other things, we also have a mineral and microbe class coming out later this year as well. So definitely check out all that stuff if you're looking to really get down and deep into the chemistry and really want to learn all there is about aquaponic cannabis. We also do from FFJ and FPJs from Korean Natural Farming. Again, here's a lactobacillus ferment of horsetail, where we put horsetail in the water for 7 days and then fermented it for 7 to 14 days and then used it for increasing silica. They have traditional methods in Jamaica, Korea, and other places, so it's been used for a long time. So we've taken a lot of these ideas and folded them into, I myself did, and folded them into a project called the Open Nutrient Project, where we're trying to consolidate all these different organic inputs, KNF, Jadam, compost teas, nutrient ferments, all the different sources into a single place, which you can find at opennutrientproject.com. We do have a wide range of different nutrient inputs. This is all the stuff that has manganese, all the plants that have manganese in it, listed by average minimum parts per million by Latin name and what part of the plant it has, so that you can collect these plants on your property and create your own ferments, teas, or composts to supplement your system in a way that's going to be actually, data-based and not just a random shot in the dark. So definitely check it out. I put a lot of time into it. There's over 40,000 plants on there. A lot of it's from Dr. Dukes. We also have some additional databases as well. And a bunch of other cool stuff on there. We have a submission form on there, so you can submit what your testing data is. Testing tables on there, so if you want to test your solutions, we have full spreadsheets on all the different tests kits for all the different minerals so that you can order the right one to test what you want to test for and not order the wrong thing, and a submission form on there so that you can let everyone else know what your stuff tested out to, so that we have this ever-growing database of different ferments, teas, and whatever else that's out in the world for people to utilize. So definitely check that out if you're looking to any kind of organic production or aquaponic production. Just want to know how to test your water better. And then you can find my podcast at Growing with Fishes Podcast on all the platforms you can think of at this point. We have over 700 hours of content. We've interviewed anybody that's anybody in the aquaponic or cannabis industry, as well as a bunch of famous people and many great experts that have since left us. So definitely check it out. A lot of great episodes, including some of the only interviews ever done with some of these cannabis experts. So really, really great content. And it's every week, every Thursday, live at 7:30 p.m. Pacific. We also have the virtual Aquaponic Cannabis Conference, November 5th and 6th. That's free on my Potent Ponics YouTube channel. We have experts from around the world, so definitely check that out. It's going to be a great time. We've had the past 2 years as well. You can find on my YouTube channel as well. So if you missed the first 2 years, you can check it out. We have hundreds of hours of content across the two, or no, maybe not, yeah, maybe about 100 hours, I guess, but between the two different days of content now, certainly over 60. So check it out. And then you can find me at apmjclass.com, Growing with Fishes, apmjnewts.com. We have the pest class, whatever it is you want to check out. We also have a Facebook group, Aquaponic Cannabis Growers. I am also a DemPure certified educator, part of the DemPure network. So if you're looking to learn how to do things even more than organic, I'm certified to train you. So check that out. And email me if you have any questions, comments, concerns, need help with your grower garden, need help with your design planning, commercial compliance, license application, any of those things at potentponics@gmail.com. Or check out all the different wonderful resources we have over at potentponics.com. Thanks everybody for watching. I think we made it in just in time, under the budget there for time. So I appreciate all of you for taking the time to listen to me today. I do hope that you managed to get quite a few different snippets from this course. I try to just throw a bunch of different things at you and show you a bunch of stuff that we've already tried so that you don't redo the same kind of things that we've already kind of proven do or do not work. And then also kind of give you some stuff to take away and to go with and to be able to utilize on your own farm and have some new methods and things that you can use. So thanks for watching today, and I appreciate you taking the time to join us.